everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we had a look at the aviation battle rating changes, which are coming to War Thunder soon, probably in some time in April. Now it's time to have a look at the ground forces and also the fleet ones, since there aren't that many fleet ones. Now, as usual, we are going over ground realistic, and then we're going over fleet arcade, which is what we're going to be looking at. So the first thing is the M8s, so the HMCs, the Chinese one and the American one are both getting moved down to 1.7. Now, if you've never actually played the M8s, they are actually kind of fun little machines. They are little derp guns at the lower BRs, but the main thing that is cool about the M8s, especially the HMC, is it has really good gun depression, pretty good gun elevation, and also a really cool reload. You know, it has a 4.3 second stock reload, which can obviously go down, and it also has a 50 cal on the top of it. The only real issue the machine has in any way is the fact that it has access to a really bad turret rotation. I'm pretty sure this machine has a hand crank turret rotation, so even when fully modified, it only has 4.2 degrees per second, and this is the main factor that, you know, kind of makes it suck. Even another factor is the fact it's open topped, so against planes it definitely struggles, but at least you have a 50 cal to cover you. Moving it down to 1.7, at least for the American tech tree, doesn't really do anything because of the fact that there aren't that many machines at 1.7 to run it with. You have the M3 GMC, which is kind of about it, so you're probably going to run it anyway at the BR that you find it at 2.0, because you can run it with the Stuart, which is an incredibly strong vehicle, and also the Locust. So at least for the American side, I don't think it'll make too much of a difference. For the Chinese side, I also don't think it'll make too much of a difference because of the fact that it has, you know, some dodgy BRs. There isn't a single, you know, 1.7 in the ground tech tree, so you'd have to use this as a leader, and I don't think it's strong enough to be used as, you know, a lead vehicle when everything else is going to be lower BR than you. So overall, it doesn't really make too much difference. The only thing I suppose it does do is take it out of that 2.7 bracket, and if you haven't realized recently, 2.7 has become pretty strong, mainly because of a few vehicles, the main one being the M4A3 105, the Sherman with the 105mm. Now that they've added another one to France, and also the pre-existing one for America, that thing at 2.7 was incredibly strong, and still is incredibly strong. And moving the M8 down to 1.7 means that because of quantitative matchmaking, you can only see a maximum of 4 2.7 vehicles in your game at one time. So overall, maybe that'll help it a little bit, but I don't think it'll make too much of a difference. Another vehicle that is getting moved down is the 15 centimeter SLG, or the 150mm, the derp gun from, of course, the Germans. It's kind of interesting to see this move down, and it does make a little bit more of a difference moving it down to 1.7, because there is actually a solid 1.7 German lineup. The Panzer IIIF, the Panzerjäger 1, the incoming SDKFC 2341 as well is going to be 1.7, so moving it down to 1.7 means you can still build a lineup around it. I really don't think the 150mm is dependent on BR. It's one of those machines you can pretty much take up to even, you know, very much higher BRs, like, you know, even 5.7 if you really feel like it, and it'll still have the same effect on the game. So to see it go down kind of is a surprise, because I didn't think it was performing that badly for its current role. The problem is its current role is never going to be a carry, it's never going to be a meta vehicle, it's just a little bit of fun, and that's okay, you know, it's alright to have these vehicles in game, which are just a little bit of fun. So the 15 centimeter going down, kind of surprised, but maybe they want it to be a little bit more competitive instead of a little bit more memey. I think it's okay though. The M15A1, the CGMC, this is also going down to 3.0. So the M15 is the one with the 37mm and the 212.7s. This going down to 3.0 isn't too much of a surprise. I still actually believe the M16 is better than it at 2.3 instead of taking this 3.0 machine So yeah, when I've talked about it before, SPAA BRs are very much all over the place. So seeing them change is, not too much of a surprise. I'm just happy with the M15. The bug got fixed where the 37mm wouldn't actually line up with the 250 cals. That was fixed during World War mode. So luckily, we don't have to worry about that. The next vehicle is the L62 and T2. This is an SPAA I've had a bit more experience with after spading it in the Swedish tech tree, and they're moving it down to 3.7 from 4.0. This is a good change. The L62 as an actual AA is not very good. The reason for this is it has inherent issues when it comes to being an AA. Mainly its turret traverse is absolutely terrible. It's open topped, so therefore it gets killed very easily, and also, it has the slow firing 40mm, which only fires one round every half a second, compared to something like the Pvkv, which has double the fire rate, meaning that it's a hell of a lot more useful. So the L62 and T2 you can't really use too well as an effective AA because of how slow the turret is, so the best thing to do with it is use it as a tank destroyer. And if you've been playing the Swedish tech tree and you played something like the LVT DGB, at 3.0 that 40mm can be incredibly dangerous, and the L62 is the same way. So the lower its BR, the more powerful it becomes as a tank destroyer instead of a very, very under par AA. So this is a good change for it, and I think it deserves it. The Pvkv II, sorry, is the first vehicle on the list which is going up, and it's going up to 3.7. So the Pvkv II, I think, deserves going up, but I would actually put it up even more. I don't think just one single change to its brackets is the way to go. I would actually increase it to maybe 4.3 or 4.7. The Pvkv has the best penetration out of all of the vehicles at rank 3. It has amazing penetration with its upgraded round, 162, 130 and 55. And just to give you a general feeling of how I've been enjoying this vehicle, so I've had 31 battles in it. I nearly have a 60% win rate, 58%, and I have 63 ground kills and 20 deaths. The reason for this is because the Pvkv II is your perfect defensive machine. You can pretty much just sit it on a point or sit it on an area, use its crazy gun depression at 14 degrees to be able just to hold off any enemy advance. You use the binoculars because this thing is kind of tall. You can just sit the binoculars on top of it and then just wait for someone to push. Then you can peek and just batter them with the 75mm. It's an incredibly strong vehicle, and it's one of those which I actually kept in my lineup until 5.3, because it can still effectively deal with tigers, it can still effectively deal with panthers, it can still effectively deal with anything, even up to jumbos. So for me personally, I am fine with that going up even more. I'm still going to run it with stuff like the Delat Torn 5.0 and even stuff like the Pvkv M43. So even though it's going up, I think it's going to go up more in the future. It is a very strong vehicle at rank 3, and the only issue it has is planes. Right, planes annihilate it, but that is literally the same problem that all of Sweden rank 3 has. So it's not a problem that just the Pvkv II struggles with. The M4748A and the M4A2 are both going up. So if you don't know what the M4748A is, this is the German Sherman, the one which was added to the game as a ground forces CBT access vehicle, and also it was sold later on as a limited purchase vehicle. So the German Sherman, which is just an M4A2, and the M4A2 going up is not a surprise. As I've been grinding through Sweden the last month or so, or well, last few weeks or so, what I've found personally is at every BR you are flooded with Shermans from pretty much every nation. They all have stabilizers, they all have either 75s or 76, and they all very good vehicles. They have, they're like jack of all trades, master of none. So they have good penetration on the gun. They have a decent stabilizer. They have decent armor. They have decent mobility. They have like just above average on everything, and this makes them incredibly competitive to use. So, and after especially the DeMar formula changes when it came to that 75, I'm not surprised to see that slowly but surely all of these Shermans are getting moved up. So the M4A2 being moved up to 4.0, I think is not really a surprise. surprise, and it just means that it affects the 3.7 lineup for the Americans a little bit. And when it comes to the Germans, once again, it's another tank to add to that 4.0 Bruiser premium lineup. You know, the Panzerkampfwagen Churchill, the KV-1B, the KV-II 754, the Panzerbefehlswagen Aus J. Then you've even got, you know, other stuff such as the T-34 747 that you can throw in that lineup. So you've got all of these vehicles that are just premiums that you can throw into this 4.0, plus the 88mm flat gun, the Stug 3G. The 4.0 lineup for Germany is incredibly strong. And it's also backed up by some pretty mean planes as well, in the forms of either fighters, like the Bf-109s, like the F-Series, or even stuff like the Ducks, if you can get them away when you have air superiority. So these two machines will still do really well, even with an up BR. You know, it's not as if these machines struggle at the 3.7 area. You know, they do well in the 3.7 area, and at 4.0 they'll face the majority of the same things. There's no nation which has a really strong 5.0 lineup apart from maybe Sweden, but even then, with the Swedish changes, it's going to be a bit of a pain trying to, you know, set it all up. So for me, these will still be fine. You'll still be able to build lineups around them, even though you will have to up-tier some of the other Shermans for the Americans. It should be okay. It's a little bit annoying that you can't just run a flush 3.7 lineup anymore, but, you know, you'll mainly face the same stuff in the form of the 4.0s, 4.3s, Germans, and Soviets, so it should be okay. The next ones are the Pvkvs. So the M43, the 1946, is going down to 4.0. So this one is kind of an interesting one. And when I talked about the Pvkv M43-46, I compared it to stuff like, why is the Pvkv II lower BR than the Pvkv M43-46? And it seems like we're slowly addressing that balance, with the 46 going down to 4.0 and the Pvkv II going up to 3.7. I can definitely see these two swapping, you know, at some point, with the 46 maybe staying at 4.0 and the Pvkv II going to 4.3, because everything that stuff like the Pvkv II can do, the 1946, you know, struggles with. It's still one of those casemate tank destroyers. It still has really annoying angles that you can be taken out with. It still has that setup so the enemy can shoot you before you shoot them, and also it has some really annoying sets of ammo racks where it's set up, but at least it doesn't get hull broken, which is definitely a large, you know, thing to it. And also you can, because it's quite a tall vehicle, it has the same thing that the Pvkv II has, where you can use its binos to basically sit in an area and make it so it is incredibly effective at holding a point. This is not an aggressive vehicle though, and it also doesn't have a turret, so you can only play it in specific playstyles, so I can see why it's going down. I actually generally disagree with it going down. I think it was fine at 4.3, but at least now, with it moving down to 4.0, at least you can run a lineup of the Pvkv II, the L62 Anti-2, and the 1946 and not get up to into hell. The problem with the rank 3 Swedish right now is you can't really build an amazing lineup at any BR. You kind of just have to put stuff together and meld them, and with these BR changes, that gets slightly better, but it's still a bit of an issue. And just to give you the stats on this 1946, so I have 56 kills, 33 deaths in it, 64% win rate. I'm averaging about 2 kills a game, and that's just playing it defensively. The next vehicle is the Pvkv M43 1963, and this is also going down to 5.0. So this actually is quite a large change, and I am happy that the 1963 is going down, even though I personally had a very positive experience in the 1963. I can definitely understand why it needs to go down, because if we compare it to something like a Delat Torn, it has a little bit more penetration, the mobility is about the same, if not, you know, slightly worse, and also it is a casemate, so therefore it doesn't really make sense being too much of a higher BR because of the inherent weaknesses advantages of not having a turret. So if we just compare it from that point of view, I think the M43 going down is completely fine, and it does mean now you can actually build a solid 5.0 lineup, which is of course the Delat Torn, the Pvkv II, and also the Pvkv M43 1963. So I'm happy it goes down for that reason. Once again, my stats on the vehicle, or at least how I used it, don't represent it being a bad vehicle. You know, I have 32 kills and 27 deaths, but once again, a 60% win rate in it. And I was basically using it once again in that defensive nature, and I had a lot of fun with it. So for me, I definitely think when it comes to it, I can understand why it's going down in BR, but I think it's actually in a pretty decent position already where it is. But at least now you can make a solid 5.0 lineup that isn't going to get into 6.3, which was definitely an issue that the machine ran into. The next vehicle to have a look at is a bunch of American vehicles, and the first one is the M4A276. This is also the Soviet M4A2 as well, which they're both going up to 5.3. So the M4A276W is exactly the same for the Soviets as it is for the Americans. The Soviet ones, I think it will be fine. If you haven't ever played 5.3 Soviets, it's incredibly fun. You got the T-3485D5T, you got the IS-1, you got the Su-85M, you can back it up with stuff like the Yak-9T, and also many other aircraft, which are just great to fit in. Even if you want to take stuff like the IL-10, also with the Tu-2s going down in BR, you can use them in this just wonderful conglomeration of just aggression and very, very funness. 5.3, 5.7 is really fun for the Soviets, so seeing that M4A2 going up, it just means it marries into that lineup, and now you have a choice of, do you want to take the T-3485, a lot of firepower, no stabilizer, decent speed, or do you want to take the American boy, the M4A2, which is a little bit slower, but it has the stabilizer and also packs a hell of a punch as well. The M4A276 for the Americans going up to 5.3. If you have a look at the general Shermans in themselves, so you got the M4A176, the M4A276, and the M4A376. Now, the respective BRs are 5.0, 5.0, 5.7. Now, with the M4A276 going up to 5.3, we actually have a nice pattern of 5.0, 5.3, 5.7, showing a little bit of progression between the Shermans. To say that the M4A1 is exactly the same as the M4A2, I think is wrong, which is why I'm also happy with the M4A2 having a different BR from the M4, and also, if you just have a look at the general characteristics of the M4A2, it matches up really well against the meta vehicles that we see from other nations at this BRs. No other nation really is running around with a bunch of stabilizers. No other nation is running around with a really powerful gun, which can pretty much penetrate anything, and also, even though the armor isn't as good, you know, at 5.3, it will still be fine. And the major thing about going to 5.3 is you get uptid into 6.3. And 6.3, you have, for the Americans, you know, the super Pershing, so you can definitely sit beside that and do well with it. You also have the M26 Pershing, which if it's in a full down tier, is an absolute monster. And the only vehicles you have to watch out for are stuff like the Tiger 2P, which, you know, you can deal with when it comes to the turrets. It's not too hard to do. The T-44 is definitely a monster in the down tier, so you got to watch out for that. But mainly, you can see that there aren't that many vehicles at 6.3 that you really have to worry about. Maybe the STAs for the Japanese in a full down tier, but even then, they're made out of paper, so you can definitely just annihilate them. I suppose you have to worry about the M26 coming from the Italian side, which is a bit of a problem. But 6.3 in general isn't a very strong BR, so you're still going to be fighting a lot around 5.3, 5.7, and even at 6.0, 6.0 isn't too much of a strong BR. As long as these vehicles don't get put into the 5.7 bracket, which then get uptid into 6.7, which is an incredibly strong BR, where a lot of nations have very good lineups, it should be completely fine. So I'm fine with the 76 going up. It is a very strong vehicle, and it sorts out the progression between the vehicles. Now let's get on to the Jumbos. So the Jumbos are also going up to 5.3. I've seen a lot of discussion about the Jumbos, a lot of people thinking that these are very negative changes, but as I've said many times, after the DeMar formula changes, after the changes when it came to the Jumbo's armor, the Jumbos are incredibly strong. Remember, these machines were 4.7 not too long ago, and basically now when they have now been put up to 5.3, at least from my point of view, nothing has really changed. I used to play the Jumbos at 5.3 anyway, with the Hellcats, with the the T20, which was about, then also just throwing in a Sherman. Now at 5.3, I'll be able to use them once again as a spearhead against stuff such as T-3485s, which you can deal with handedly, and also against stuff like Tigers and Panthers. Just load a bit more APCR and you'll be fine. Yes, the 75 will struggle in a full up tier against a few machines such as the T-44, but something that has to be said a lot of the time that a lot of people forget about is many people, when it comes to heavy tanks, they go, well, in a full up tier its armor doesn't matter. There are many heavy tanks in the game where their armor doesn't matter in a full up tier. I would actually say the majority of them, their armor doesn't matter. Look at the Object 279. It's going to be added in at 8.3. Now put it up against a 9.3 vehicle. It's going to get mullered. It's going to get massacred. Take a KV-1B, right? The KV-1B even at 4.0 and put it up against something like the Pvkv 1963, which is getting down to 5.0. That will penetrate it like it is butter, or a hot knife through butter to be exact. And this should be no different to any other vehicle in the game. And it is a general trend. Yes, I would like armor to make, a bit more of a difference, and the way you would do that is to limit the BR matchmaking, so you put it down to like plus or minus 0.7, but the main thing to understand is the Jumbo should not be seen as different to any other heavy tank in the game. When a heavy tank is in a full up tier, it will get mullered. When a heavy tank is in a full down tier, it will do really well, and that's what we're seeing from the Jumbos, and it's exactly the same for the it's exactly the same for the Tigers, it's exactly the same for 6.7 heavies, the T29, which got moved up to 7.0. So yeah, I think the Jumbos will be fine at that BR, as long as you just carry a bit more APCR to deal with some of those heavier sorted targets. You can still use it as a battering ram, even though its gun will lose some of its potency. You can still use it to go through the enemy lines and then be backed up by some incredibly powerful secondary machines, such as the 76s, which should be able to deal with the targets that you may struggle with. The Type 65s, so they're going up to 5.7. These are the SPAAs, which, is a gift vehicle or an event vehicle for the Soviets, and then for the Chinese, just got added straight flush into the tree. These are not very good AAs, but they are very good tank destroyers, and moving them up to 5.7, at least for the Chinese point of view and the Soviet point of view, doesn't really matter, because the Chinese didn't really have a 5.3 lineup. I mean, if you want to count the PT-76 without a stabilizer and the ISU-152 or the ISU-122 as a lineup, I mean, you go ahead, but it ain't a fun one. So I was up tiering it to 5.7 anyway, with the Hellcats and the T-3485 S53. I think getting them up tiered is, fine. Using that BR-167P round or belt, which has access to a HVAP round with 100mm of pen, can be incredibly deadly against a lot of vehicles. And also, as I said, its AA capabilities aren't great, but if we compare it to other 5.7 AAs, it's in a pretty good spot. There isn't many AAs that I would actually take at lower tiers which are better than it, apart from maybe the Oswind, the Whirlwind, the R3 is there as well. But at 5.7, maybe the AMX-13 DCA, but that would be pretty close. But overall, I think pushing it up in BR doesn't make any difference with it. You just run it with the 5.7s that already exist in the tech tree. I just want to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Martinez, Super Cacti, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, and also Elove Goat and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.